I wonder if you're currently in a period of waiting for something, and if so, what are you waiting for? Maybe it's the summer holidays, or maybe they've just started. Maybe it's for the weather to get a bit cooler. Maybe by the time you're seeing this, it will be a bit cooler, here's hoping. Maybe it's for England to finally win the World Cup. You could be waiting a while. And how do you find the process of waiting? Maybe it depends on what you're waiting for. Much as we may or may not like it, waiting is, after all, part of life. And that's equally true of the life of faith, perhaps particularly so. Jesus' parables today, following on from those last week, contain further teaching about what the kingdom of heaven is like. And it makes it clear that waiting is part of that discovery. We catch glimpses of the kingdom of heaven, God's way of doing things, in Jesus' life and teaching. But we're told it will not be fully revealed until Jesus comes again. And so Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is like waiting for a mustard seed to grow, or like waiting for some dough to rise to make bread. Or, and admittedly this is borrowing from last week's reading, it's like waiting for seeds to grow and finding out that your field contains not only your best crop, but also weeds. I don't know about you, but in my experience, it feels like those weeds seem to grow rather faster than the other seeds, although maybe that says something about my perspective. And Jesus also makes it clear that waiting for the kingdom to come, and indeed the life of faith more generally, requires patience. Jacob knew this, as is clearly demonstrated in our reading from Genesis today. I wonder how he felt as he found out he'd have to wait for another 7 years for Rachel. Even if we're told that the measure of his love was seen in the fact that those 7 years seemed to him but a few days, still, I'm sure it felt a long time. But why did he wait? Why did Jacob wait? Presumably because it, or rather she, was worth waiting for. In a similar way, Jesus also makes it clear in the subsequent parables in our gospel reading that we wait, knowing the value of the kingdom, like treasure hidden in a field or a pearl of great value. Its value which draws both on the old treasures of the ancient stories and the hope of Israel, alongside the new vision of the kingdom. But that's not all. Indeed, I think the value of waiting for the kingdom lies not only in what will come, but also in the very process of waiting itself. If we believe alongside Paul as he writes his letter to the church in Rome, that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purposes, surely that includes waiting times. Although, admittedly, that may be harder to see, especially when we're in the middle of waiting. Does it feel good to wait for whatever you're waiting for? Maybe not. To wait like that requires faith, to hold on to that promise even when it seems very unlikely. Indeed, what Paul says is at its heart a very statement of faith that God is at work. We see this in God's steadfast commitment to creation and in his rescuing of creation from the bondage to decay. The God who also loves us so completely and intimately, and which nothing can separate us from. But back to the parables. And maybe it's because I enjoy making bread, I like to focus particularly on that parable of the yeast and the bread. You cannot bake bread without waiting. It's not a process you can rush. If you rush bread making, you can end up with dense and rubbery bread, which has less flavour. I know, and I've been there. Waiting for things in life can be hard, particularly maybe when we don't know how long we're going to be waiting for, or that changes along the way. And similarly, you can have the perfect recipe for proving dough, and then that's all messed up by the air temperature, as they found out more than once in the Great British Bake Off tent. But waiting is, of course, important. Things happen, don't they, as we wait, often though unseen, at least over a short period of time, just like dough, although we might notice the impact over a longer period. You may not see the dough fermenting or how it's happening, yet you can see the result as those yeast begin to consume sugars in the flour and we see carbon dioxide is produced. Those bubbles of gas cause the dough to expand and rise. And that waiting time is needed to make a lovely, light and airy, well-baked bread. Some things can't be rushed, because if you prove dough too fast, you'll know about it, because the bread won't taste right. I wonder if that also has parallels in other situations in our lives. And of course, there are also other very important parts in the process of making bread, alongside that proving of the dough. One thing is knocking back the dough, which is really important. It's one of my favourite parts. You do so, and it's very physical, to remove those large air bubbles and to redistribute the yeast. It makes the texture better, and you get a lighter dough with a better rise. Which also got me thinking whether it's in any sense possible to see the knockbacks that we may face in life, perhaps particularly when we're waiting for something that we're longing for, as something which can also shape us in more positive ways too. Which of course is not to say that we seek them out, or that we can necessarily see them as shaping us in positive ways at the time. But eventually, when we see the outcome, might we be able to join in with Paul in saying that all things do indeed work together for good, for those who love God? Which is not to minimise the pain of these times. And here I take comfort from knowing that Paul was in jail a short while before he wrote these words, and indeed would be again soon. He's not writing this from a place of comfort. These are the words of someone who understood hardship and challenge at a really deep level. So what enabled Paul to say these words? I think in large part is because of what he had lived through and what he had witnessed, primarily the death and resurrection of Jesus, events which made real the love of which he spoke, a love which goes deeper than all the forces at work in the powers and principalities. Paul could therefore look on his circumstances, as bad as they were, with faith and hope, because of his faith in God's faithfulness, in God's good purposes, and in God's love. He saw that in Jesus' life and was helped to hold on to those promises in his moments of weakness by the Spirit who was at work in him, as he tells us there in verse 26. And so there is, I believe, a great sense of encouragement for us too as we wait. To wait, yes, with patience for whatever we're waiting for, whether that is for a situation to be righted, for justice, or for something else. As we wait for the coming of the kingdom of heaven and all its fullness, when God's way of doing things will be established throughout the earth, we can wait with hope because of God's faithfulness, even in the times of knockbacks in life. Indeed, it may even be possible, as hard as this is, and not underestimating the pain they can bring, and it may require the gift of hindsight. Maybe we can see something in these knockbacks which shape us in good ways, trusting that all things do indeed work together for good for those who love our faithful God, who are called according to his purposes, and from whose love nothing can separate us.